Now, I'm very pleased to introduce my first guest. From Christian Concern, we've got so many stories to talk about that I don't even know where to start, but I'm very pleased that Roger is able to join me. Roger, Kiska, thank you for coming on. How are you?
Good, good. It's a pleasure to be on. Thank you, Kelvin.
I think we'll start with Mrs. Brennan's story. This is the latest person to be arrested for praying within one of these PSPOs, Public Service Protection Orders. I think we're able to show a clip. I'll let our tech guys fiddle behind the scenes to make that happen. But we can show a clip of our friend getting arrested. Here we go.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread.
Praying the Lord's
Forgive
Prayer.
us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver
Please
us
come
from
over.
evil. Amen.
Under the new Abortions Act here, you're breaking the law, right? You're within an exclusion zone at the hospital. There's clearly marked from 1, 2, and then there's another couple of signs here. You're
Right,
breaking
I'll
the
pause
law.
it there. We won't watch the whole thing, but it's available on Twitter. A police officer comes over and says, "You are breaking the law." And literally all that Mrs. Brennan was doing was praying. Why is praying breaking the law?
Well, it certainly shouldn't be. I mean, it's in Northern Ireland, of all places, saying the Lord's Prayer is against the law if you're within 100 to 250 meters of a place where abortions are being undertaken. And, like the rest of Europe, Northern Ireland and the UK are signatories to the European Convention on Human Rights, and that protects the right, among many other things, to pray, to publicly manifest your belief. And if you can't do it in front of an abortion clinic, my goodness, for the sake of all those little children, it strains credulity, honestly.
It does seem to be directly related to abortion because it's within these PSPOs are within the geographical bounds of abortion centers, aren't they? So they're saying that people can't pray specifically in the local vicinity of an abortion center. What is it about abortion that makes prayer so abhorrent?
Well, I mean, it's a good question. Or what is so abhorrent about even peaceful protest? I mean, if you take this to an extreme instance, if you have a residence on that block and people have the window open and they're praying, could they be arrested? So the law lacks clarity, it lacks foreseeability. Why is it that we allow so much other, even violent protest in the country, and we applaud it quite often, but you can't pray in front of an abortion clinic? It's really, it shocks the conscience that someone could be arrested for that in this day and age.
But I take issue, I agree with you, but I take issue with the word protest because I don't believe that prayer is protest. But is that what the opponents here are saying? Is that they're saying that Mrs. Brennan was protesting by saying the Lord's Prayer?
No, you're absolutely right. It's not protest. Just the very fact that someone is there doing something which opposes the mindset that abortion is a wonderful thing and allowing people to have absolute access, whether they're being pushed against their will by a partner or whatever the reason might be for going there, to say that they can't even have that vision of someone praying for them and their child is, the fact that we're even discussing this, that as you saw, the Lord's Prayer, and she said a number of other prayers, that is enough to get you potentially 6 months in jail.
Roger, I'm trying to get my head around it, and I have been for a number of, years now at this point, because these stories keep cropping up. This is, I believe, the fifth person that's been arrested for this, and I still don't understand it. I really don't, because we live in a pluralistic society where there are many ideas, and we're taught we're supposed to be tolerant of all different ideas. But one set of ideas says that abortion is reproductive health care. Another set of ideas, an idea set that I believe we both share, is the Christian ideas, but it's believed that abortion is not reproductive because it's ending reproduction. It's not health care because it's not healthy, it's death. It's not caring because it's killing an unborn baby. So we have two conflicting sets of ideas. The Christian idea that we're all born in the image of God and that life is sacred, all human life is sacred. And we've got the secular idea that actually life is the value of life is determined by the mother, and it's her choice whether she wants to proceed with giving birth to that life or ending that life prematurely. Now, these two sets of ideas under our liberal society should be equal. I don't think they should be, but liberal society teaches that they should be equal. So why in this instance, in terms of abortion, are we seeing that one set of ideas are being persecuted and oppressed to protect the other set of ideas?
Yeah, and I'll take that a step further by suggesting that there's this argument that abortion is a human right, and it's not. It's simply not. It's not at the European level. It's not at the domestic level, and it's not even a complete right. It's a service that is regulated. Under certain circumstances, you can obtain one. Under certain circumstances, you can't. It's a regulated service that we are protecting to the extent of throwing people potentially in jail for merely praying within 100 meters of that area. And I would say that the jurisprudence on this in Europe is fascinating because there was a case a number of years ago, not too long ago, in Germany of a gentleman who was handing out literature in front of an abortion clinic, which named the doctor, which linked it to genocide and concentration camps. And the European court held that to be legitimate protest on the very basis that believing that life begins from conception is a protected belief, it's a sacred belief, and it's one that lends itself to an important discussion that we are all having in public, as you mentioned. That is whether that child is an unborn human worthy of living or not.
I mean, I would say at this point we can pretty much all agree that life beginning at conception isn't just a religious belief; it's a scientific fact, a provable fact. And I would say that the problem here is that we're protecting. See, I keep falling into the trap of making this about abortion. It is, of course, to one degree, it is about abortion because this is what they're ultimately protecting, their so-called right to end an unborn life. But it's not. It's about free speech. It's about freedom of worship, freedom of religion. It's about the freedom to think or to pray to one's God. That's what's being persecuted here. And they're saying it's about abortion, but actually it's not. Mrs. Brennan wasn't there to abort a child or to prevent anyone from aborting a child. She was there to pray. And her prayer is what got her arrested. So I find it difficult to separate these things. What arguments do you have to help people like myself who are saying, look, it's not even about abortion. This is about free speech and freedom of worship.
Yeah, and it's not being applied equally. I've worked with a number of pro-life student groups and pro-life organizations who have been viciously attacked, either in the virtual public square or in the actual public square, harassed by pro-abortion protesters, called the most horrendous of names, physically handled. And that has gone without punishment. And you don't hear those stories in front of abortion clinics. You might see picketing, you might see some people vigorously standing up for life. But it's almost universally peaceful, and there's been no evidence put forward by either the Northern Ireland government or Westminster to say otherwise. Yet they've taken this extreme measure of limiting free speech, and to do so under the legal standards, there has to be a legitimate aim, and there has to be proportionality. And if you have no evidence that peaceful protest or prayer is causing a disturbance, then there should be under the Human Rights Act no right to interfere with freedom of expression or freedom of religious belief.
That I find really interesting because in this country, in the United Kingdom, we haven't had any instances, as far as I can find, of harassment or intimidation or abuse outside of abortion centres. We've had quiet protests. We've also had people handing out literature. And this is important because people have been saved through this literature. Lives have literally been saved. I know people who have grown up and said their parents were thinking about abortion, but they were given another alternative, a better alternative. In some cases, in some case of adoption instead of abortion, but also in some cases just love and support for the mother to help the mother raise the child. But that, it seems to me, is what they're afraid of. They're afraid, they love their satanic sacrament so much that they want to protect it and prevent people knowing that there is an alternative option. Because in my humble experience, it's the doctors, it's the medical professionals who are pushing this abortion onto vulnerable women. But we don't see any other area of healthcare where the conversation isn't allowed to be had on the other side. If someone said, well, cosmetic surgery, boob jobs, I could say I think boob jobs it's vainglory, it's vanity, it's sinful in that way. If I was to protest that, nobody would have an issue with it. Nobody would say, well, yeah, you've got a point, but I feel like I need bigger boobs or smaller boobs, whatever. That's my life. There may be a conversation about it, but it's abortion in particular that seems to be sacred to them. And so, sorry, I know I'm rambling here, but I want to ask you the question: is Mrs. Brennan okay?
She's a remarkable woman. She's a fighter. she knew very well. At least I believe she knew very well. If you take what was said during that conversation about knowing that she was breaking the law because she was told by the police officers, and she said she owes a higher duty to the law of God. She's willing to go to jail for this, and God bless her for it. I hope that precisely because of cases like this, these brave individuals willing to pay this price, whether it be financial or literal jail time, that this will change. And it's wonderful that shows like this and instances like this bring this to the public space so that people can see how outrageous this really is.
Thank you. Well, we do what we can, and we don't always succeed. So one story that I feel we failed on as a media in general, well, as the British in general, is Suriksha Thermalesh. So this is always a difficult one for me to talk about, but this was the 19-year-old girl who was terminally ill. She caught COVID. It affected her comorbidities, and the doctors said that she was actively dying. And she said she wanted to die trying to live. She had a fight with her doctors, not a physical fight. The doctors said, no, you're dying. And she said, I want to try to live. And her family found an experimental treatment in America. The doctors the NHS didn't allow her to go forward for that. You guys took it to court. The courts had psychoanalysts and psychotherapists judge her compos mentis, an adult willing, incapable and able to make her own decisions, yet still the court sided with the surgical professionals who said, no, she must be delusional because she's not following our advice. Essentially, the state, through the NHS and the judges and the courts, played God. And they put a gagging order on Suriksha and her family that said we couldn't talk about her publicly. We had to refer to her as patient ST. And we couldn't ask people to pray for her by name, and we couldn't crowdfund to send her to America. And we talked about this on my show, on the Common Sense Crusade, back when it was on TV. And I said, look, I'm willing to break that embargo and put her name out there if that's what her family want. Between saying that and having the conversation with her family, unfortunately, Suriksha passed away, went to glory. And so we lost practically. We didn't get to win that one for her practically. But I understand there has been a victory spiritually. Could you tell us about where we are with that story at the moment?
Sure, I will. First of all, say when you say that she went to glory, she was a believer. So that is an accurate way to put it. Before I give an update, I'll just say one thing about the crowdfunding. Now, Sadiqa didn't want her name to be anonymized. She fought against it. So who was the court protecting with this reporting restriction? And that precisely prevented the family from crowdfunding, because she could have raised the money, and I suspect quite quickly, given the circumstances, to go to Canada or the US and get that treatment. Yeah. And even so, talking about the case in a minute, even if she had been found mentally competent and released by the hospital, they didn't have the funds, because during that period they weren't able to raise the funds because of the anonymity order. So, we were talking earlier about freedom of speech. When it comes to these major public discussions, that is precisely one. When the person whose life is at stake wants her name to be out there, she should have it out there. It's like being in a lake, screaming for your life. The people are around you and they would help you, but you're not allowed to be identified, and so you're left there to die. What happened in the Court of Appeal yesterday was that, as you said, during the Court of Protection hearings, she was deemed mentally incompetent to make medical decisions on her own behalf for the sole reason that she disagreed with the prognosis and the desire of her medical team to basically end her life. By wanting to live, she was mentally incompetent. She had two psychiatrists. They were appointed by the court. So the first one spoke to her and said she's completely mentally competent. The second one is an interesting one, because initially she was upset and she didn't want to speak to him. So he wrote a report without having seen her, saying she's incompetent. Later, he had the opportunity to see her, and he changed his mind. He said she's fully fit mentally and to make those decisions. Yet the Court of Protection sided with her medical team in intensive care, who had no psychological background. And the court said that based on their prognosis, not those of the psychiatrists, she was mentally unfit. So the Court of Appeal overturned that. and said, regrettably, what happened to her shouldn't have happened. She should have been deemed mentally fit. The presumption under the Mental Capacity Act, Section 1, subsection 2, is that there's a presumption of capacity, and that should have been upheld. And they should have heard the evidence of these psychiatrists.
Well, I'm glad you guys still continue to fight the fight. I'm glad you got that victory. It feels like a hollow victory, but we should celebrate our wins. It seems to me the very people that are supposed to help us and protect us are the very ones harming us at the moment. When it's a medical team and the courts of the land, they should be there to protect the vulnerable above all. But it seems they've lost the idea that we are imago Dei, that we're made in the image of God. So all life is at the value of whatever they say it is. If they say your life is no longer valuable because you're dying, you're actively dying, then that's them playing God. Whereas the Christian stance would be that all human life is valuable because God chooses when we are born and God chooses when we are gone. But what can we do without a absolute objective moral standard? Everything becomes abstract. What's next?
It's hollow in the sense that she passed away needlessly, but it's not hollow in the sense that future people in that situation, and we heard about her case because she was brave enough to fight, but there are untold numbers of people, we literally don't know how many because of how secretive the court of protection is, who could have already passed away under the exact same circumstances, but didn't have the media exposure. So we don't know how many people she will help, but I suspect it will be a lot with this precedent.
That's a very good point. I hadn't thought about that. If there are any cases out there and people are watching that we are not aware of because they've been gagged, please let us know. Please get in touch. It's calvin@lotuseaters.com. I'm always happy to expose these cases and put them out there. And I know Christian Concern are the same. I think that about covers it from the Christian Concern update. We've got Aaron Edwards coming on later to talk about his story as well. So there's another update. You guys are really soldiers for Christ. I'm so happy to be working with you guys. Roger, Kiska, thank you very much and God bless you.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you for watching my Common Sense Crusade. If you'd like to watch the whole show, you can subscribe to lotuseaters.com for as little as £5 per month, and then you get access to a bank of content as well. My show is 3 p.m. every Thursday. See you there. Deus Vult.